Hello fellow investor and welcome to this channel. In this video we're going to take a look at the earnings expectations for Nvidia. Nvidia is scheduled to report third quarter earnings on Wednesday, November the 19th after the market close. We'll cover several topics to see how Nvidia is trading going into the earnings and help set expectations moving forward. We will review the current price chart and trend charts along with some key valuation metrics from Seeking Alpha and Fast Graphs. I'll also share my Nvidia portfolio holdings and performance. Let's get started.
Nvidia is scheduled to report third quarter earnings on Wednesday, November 19th after the market close. In the previous quarter, Nvidia reported revenue of $46.74 billion, beating revenue estimates by $687.48 million. Nvidia reported earnings of $1.05 per share, beating estimates by 4 cents. For this quarter, the revenue estimate is $54.93 billion with earnings of $1.25 per share. Over the last 90 days, 31 analysts raised estimates and 6 analysts lowered estimates. Nvidia meets or beats analysts' one-year forward estimates 91% of the time. Nvidia is showing negative relative strength going into the earnings. The options market is pricing an implied move of plus or minus 7.6%.
We'll take a look at the Nvidia one-year daily price chart. We can see over the past week that Nvidia has tested the 50-day moving average twice. So one on November the 7th, which was a Friday, and then this past Friday the 14th that also traded intraday below the 50-day, but it did close about $5 a share or so above that 50-day moving average. Nvidia is currently trading just a little over 10% from the intraday high on the 29th of October. And from that close, it's trading just around 8% lower than that closing high. You can see that we've tested that 50-day moving average a few times over the past few months. After we came out of the tariff announcements and broke above that 50-day moving average, it went for several months without ever testing that moving average again. That's this blue line. The red line is the 200-day moving average. It is trading about 24% above that moving average. The 5-day moving average, the purple line, has been decreasing since about November the 3rd. It has recently crossed, I guess it didn't cross below it, but it touched the 21-day moving average, which is this green line, which had kind of leveled out a bit. And it looks like the 5-day moving average may be trading just slightly below that 21-day EMA. The RSI is currently trading right around 49, which is in bearish territory, but just barely. The PPO is positive. We did have a negative crossover about November the 6th, and those bars do seem to be increasing at the moment, maybe leveled out the last 2 days. So as we go into earnings, we're seeing a weaker RSI, but a PPO that is still bullish. The accumulation has come off of its peak just barely, so the accumulation still looks pretty good. We did have money flow that went below the zero line on about the 15th of October, recovered back to the zero line, and then bottomed out on about the 6th of November and has been improving slightly. We're fluctuating right around that zero line. Over the past year, Nvidia has outperformed the S&P 500 by 14.5%. It has outperformed the technology sector by 4.83%. It has underperformed the semiconductor industry group for most of this past year. It was pretty much performing even with that industry group back in December of last year. And we can also see that that industry group overall has outperformed the S&P 500 by 23.76%. So if we look back in history just a little bit, if we go back to January the 27th, we can see that Nvidia dropped about 16.97%, and that was on high volume. And that was following the DeepSeek announcement that was creating some fears that the high-end GPU demand might be in jeopardy. And then on February the 27th, following a beat on the top and bottom lines, Nvidia closed down about 8.48%, and that was also on high volume. And it did produce a bearish engulfing candle. And that was basically concerns around the AI capital spend weighing on the price action. And over the last year, we have had several of these bearish engulfing candles that have led to short-term downtrends. After this earnings announcement, we did see the price continue to downtrend, and it finally closed at $97.63, and that was also on above average volume following the tariff announcement. On May the 28th, after a beat on revenue earnings, Nvidia closed up 3.25%, also on above average volume. And then on August the 27th, they reported they beat on the revenue and earnings, but they closed down 0.79% the next trading day and continued lower until the bottom was reached on September the 5th. On that date, they did have an RSI that had reached its minimum, which was below the 40 line. Since September the 5th, Nvidia has held above that 40 line, with the most recent peak on October the 29th, and that particular peak surpassed the previous peak, which was showing that we had higher prices still with higher momentum. Over the past 2 weeks, we have seen a decline in pricing, and this is basically because the AI spend is once again come into focus, putting pressure on the Nvidia stock price. When we look at the Nvidia 5-year weekly chart using 3 sets of moving averages, one for the long term, one for the medium term, and one for the short term, we can see that Nvidia has positive momentum in the long term. In the shorter term, it is still in positive momentum. In the short term, it tends to be in positive momentum. We have had a week or two at a time where the momentum had traded below the zero line. But I think Nvidia is set up pretty well as we move into the earnings this week. When we look at the valuation growth and profitability metrics from Seeking Alpha for Nvidia, we can see that Nvidia is trading at a forward PE of 41.86 times compared to the sector at 28.38 times. The expected EPS growth rate for Nvidia is 73.53 compared to the sector at 12.60%. The expected revenue growth for the next year is 68.24% for Nvidia compared to the sector median at 7.65%. And then when we look at profitability, we can see the net margin for Nvidia is 52.41% compared to the sector median at 4.64%. So while Nvidia is trading at a higher forward PE, we can see that the growth rate for both revenue and earnings are much higher than the sector, and Nvidia is also much more profitable than the sector overall. Let's take a look at Nvidia in fast graphs. We can see that Nvidia is trading at a blended PE of 45.27 times. They have an EPS yield of 2.21%, a dividend yield of only 0.02%. When we look at the metrics, we can see that they've had an adjusted operating earnings growth rate over this 13-year period of 55.05%. FastGraphs calculates their fair value at 55.05 times, which is indicated by the orange line. And then the normal PE, which is the multiple that the market normally applies to Nvidia, is 42.24 times, indicated by this blue line. When we look at the earnings history over this 13-year period, we can see that in 2016 and 2020, they did have a contraction in their earnings growth. They also had a contraction in 2023. 2024 was a huge expansion in earnings of 288%. Followed by 131% in 2025. And fiscal year 2026, they're expected to grow 52%, 2027, 47%, and 2028, 26%. Nvidia is currently trading below their normal market multiple and their fair value. FastGraphs has their fair value price calculated to be $249 at the end of this year and $367 by the end of 2027. If that were to occur, we could expect about a 98.25% total rate of return. We'll take a look at my Nvidia trade history. I first entered Nvidia in November of 2023, and I've traded that position 30 times through November of 2025. I currently hold 80 Nvidia shares at an average cost of $56.40. The total return on my holding is 40.1%, and for my currently invested capital, it's 251.6%. For the 30 trades, I have 24 that are winning trades, 6 that have been losing trades, And the gain loss ratio is 5.21 to 1 with an 80% win rate. If you find these earnings previews helpful, I would appreciate you subscribing to the channel so you are alerted to future videos as they get posted. I would also be grateful if you like the video to help support this channel. I wish you the best in your investment journey and remember to trade well.